Good afternoon, everybody. I am so excited to welcome you all to our very first presentation as a part of the Berkshire's High Peaks Festival. My name is Carolyn Regula, and I will be hosting our webinars throughout the duration of the festival. All of our sessions are being recorded and will be streamed on YouTube as well via the Close Encounters with Music YouTube channel. Please consider supporting Close Encounters with Music and our ongoing festival. Our mission is to engage the imagination of diverse concert audiences in a welcoming setting, to connect listeners to performers and composers, and foster the excitement and sense of community that live performance builds. Establish a comfortable listening environment and turn performances into enriching, educational, and uplifting experiences. I will be including the donation link for Close Encounters in the chat. And with this chat, we have some interactive components for our presentation today. So I encourage you all to contribute in the group chat, giving some fun feedback to our presenter today. And if you have a question for our presenter, you can use the Q&A window, which is found at the bottom of your screen. And I will be keeping an eye on the Q&A session throughout the course of our presentation. I want to thank you all so much for being here today. This is our first public event to launch this festival, where we are persevering and providing musical and educational experiences virtually this summer. It is wonderful to have all of you here with us. We met with our faculty and student participants this morning for a wonderful meet and greet, and I'm excited for you all to experience these wonderful presentations with us. So, I am so excited to introduce today's guest. We have cellist Erik Anderson. Dr. Anderson teaches at Minot State University, and among many accomplishments, Dr. Anderson is the principal cellist in the Minot Symphony Orchestra and artistic director of Dakota Chamber Music. He has also appeared with the Cincinnati Symphony, Opera, and Pops Orchestra. He is also a huge advocate for modern music and has collaborated with living composers such as George Crumb and Milton Babbitt. You guys are in for a wonderful treat this afternoon, and I would like to hand things over to our guest speaker, Dr. Erik Anderson. And I will ask Dr. Anderson to unmute, please.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were going to unmute me or if you wanted me to, but we are unmuted. So thank you very much, Carolyn. Yehuda, for inviting me, fellow faculty, students, welcome. And I'm very excited to help kick off this presentation, or this festival with a presentation. Carolyn, could you start the PowerPoint and go to the first slide, please? While we're doing that, I can share that there's a bit of mischief or mischievousness in just about all that I do musically and academically, and I like to think that comes a great deal from my interactions with Yehuda at CCM and at Aspen. He is mischievous if nothing else, and in the very best way. So, storytelling, language, and music. Go to the first slide, or the next slide, please. All right, so The Adventure of Anna, the Lonely Mantis Shrimp. Prologue. This is the story of Anna. Anna is a mantis shrimp, a magnificent shrimp by any objective standard, living alone in a beautiful coral reef. On this day, she is struck with the spirit of adventure. Chapter 1. Emerging from her burrow, Anna went north. She discovered bright green and yellow corals. She went east, finding a school of fish in session, but with no time to play. She traveled south, and that's when she saw it. To the west, in an undiscovered valley, a motion and form very like her own. Heart racing, she moved quickly across the seafloor. Chapter 2. I'm Anna, said Anna politely. I'm Bastian, replied Bastian bashfully. Anna took 3 steps backward, twirled, and looked back with confidence. Bastian took 3 awkward steps to the left, twirled, and fell. Anna giggled, but quickly composed herself and beckoned Bastian to follow her lead. She scampered up a small sandhill. She leapt atop a seaweed-covered log and climbed nimbly up a large yellow coral. Bastian had done his best, but was uncomfortable up so high. He carefully climbed back onto the log, anxiously ambled down the sandhill, and found himself in an unfamiliar part of the reef, now alone and missing his new friend. Chapter 3. Bastian, called Anna worriedly, where are you? From the other side of a small hill, Bastian heard Anna's call and began to climb. He was cautious at first, being in unfamiliar territory, but he kept climbing. Finally, reaching the crest, he saw 2 joyful sights: familiar seafloor a short distance from his home, and Anna just a few steps away in that same direction. Bastian called out to Anna and raced towards her. Anna, relieved to see her friend, smiled and turned toward him. Bastian arrived, feeling more confident and happy than at any time in his life. They began to dance, with Anna leading, a kind of mimicking Catch Me If You Can shrimp dance humans wouldn't understand. Anna took 2 steps, Bastian 1. Anna 2, Bastian 1. Anna 2 more, Bastian 1. And they raced together down a series of small sandhills nearing Anna's home, but, more intriguingly, toward the tallest coral bed Bastian had ever seen. Anna exclaimed, "Let's go!" and began moving up. Bastian followed, dizzy with excitement. Up they went, higher and higher. From the top, they could see Bastian's burrow. This was the most dramatic vantage point either had known, which makes it all the more tragic what happened next. As they turned to leave, a coral branch snapped. Bastian fell first, with Anna soon after, tumbling, jostled, and bumped all the way down until each came to rest, motionless on the sandy floor. Anna opened her eyes, stretching out her front arms for balance, unable to move or speak. She looked around. No sign of her friend. As a small bit of fortune, she had landed within a short distance of her home. Stretching out her front arms for balance once more, she slowly managed to get upright. Chapter 4. Weary, sore, and lonely, Anna began moving up the small embankment toward her burrow. As she moved, she thought of Bastian, and with a smile, imitated his funny little dance. Epilogue. And so ends our story of Anna. Anna, a mantis shrimp of spirit and adventure. Lonely? Yes. And drained from the day's events. But, safe in her burrow, she was already planning for tomorrow. Next slide. So, what goes into storytelling? I think the prevalence of Netflix, of Hulu, of all the cinemas, of plays that go on, of stories that we read. We live in a culture that is surrounded by storytelling, often in a video format, but books and even sitting around the campfire and telling stories is part of our culture from very young age all the way through life. So in effective storytelling, there are a couple of key elements that I'd like to discuss. Number one, there's a stylized expressivity, which means when you're telling a story, you can't just speak the way you read. You read quickly, and all the stuff that goes on happens inside your head. It's a world of expression and activity, but it happens internally. When you tell stories, you must have a way of conveying an idea to your audience. And what that means is you need to use inflection, which brings us to our second bullet point: dramatic use of timing, volume, vocal timbres, and descriptors. Words, of course, that is the technical vocabulary that you're using, are important, but even more important is the way you push forward or pull back, increase in volume, use hushed tones, and even change the quality of your voice to help inflect all of the words with meaning. Other key elements are a thorough knowledge of the story, the characters, and the language you're using. You must, as the storyteller, know the start, the beginning, and the ending, or at least be able to invent that fast enough that you're able to keep a consistent pace and create an arc that makes sense. Since most stories mimic human life, we all have quite a bit of experience with what's plausible and what is not. And most stories are, for the most part, within the plausible, with small departures from that when effective. So a storyteller must know the story they're telling. And then the last thing, it requires a listener. A good story is nothing without those to receive it. And there is a responsibility for the listener too. They must become emotionally and or intellectually invested in the story, in the way that they are listening, but always predicting what's going to happen to Anna, what's going to happen to Bastian. Oh no, they fell. What could happen next? There's a dramatic pause, and a pause is not a moment in time that is void of expression. In fact, it is the time where our brains are probably the most active, wondering what could come next. Could we go to the next slide? All right, so in this one, Carolyn is going to join us again. She's a very good sport. She is going to read a story. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the story when she's done, but there are some surprises, both for Carolyn, because she has not read this before, and for you as an audience. And I think it'll be obvious as soon as she starts, but we'll let her read now. What I want you to do is to think about this experience. And she's going to read a much shorter story, probably 30 to 40 seconds long in total. What I want you to do is pay attention to those 4 things from the previous slide. Carolyn, do you want to go back one slide? So these are the 4 things I'd like you to keep track of. What is your experience as a listener? Okay, move forward to the next slide, and Carolyn, the stage is yours.
Lingvo estas amusa efero. Granda partu de gia signifio divina de espir pliana liberado. Bebuj kaj bestuj lega citi jun, signor plui qua u vort proviso. Por comprene si la stan sea jari da praquitado, studado kaj escoltado. Sid Si tu pli complita, comprino affretta, la plage recan bildon, cage pli completan, caple bon, receive entillage, cage cri.
Okay, so now what we need is your comments. And I would love it if your faces could appear on the screen. If not, then either mention your comments to Carolyn. But what I need to know is, what did you get out of that story? What was effective? What did you take from the story? What do you think Carolyn was trying to get across? Maybe what is it about? So I will give a few minutes for you to respond, generate some comments on that particular question. All right, Carolyn, do we have anyone responding or letting us know what they got out of that?
Not quite yet, Eric, but let's give people a couple other minutes. Really quick. We have one.
Good.
Thank you. Yes. Being an English speaker, I could not understand the words themselves, but I assume by Carolyn's raised voice and powerful delivery, thank you, that the character was speaking in an assertive manner. I could be completely off the mark, though.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I'd love to have 2 more comments.
No idea what the story was about due to the language barrier, but the inflection of Carolyn's voice as she told the story made it a captivating listen.
Very good. One more.
The inflection made it seem like a journey or a quest. Mm-hmm. Maybe wonderful. I'm saving some shrimps. Maybe you don't know. Maybe.
Who knows?
Who knows?
So that's great. So Carolyn was a very good sport because she does not speak this language, and I did not allow her to look it up. So in other words, she had no idea what she was reading. Her directive for me was to read it as though she knew exactly what she was talking about and to be as convincing as possible. Now, I also knew that the audience would have no idea what this story is about. Carolyn, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so what we still have is stylized expressivity and dramatic use of timing, volume, vocal timbres, and descriptors. What we're missing is a thorough knowledge of the story, the characters, and the language. Obviously, that's just gone. And perhaps most of the emotional investment of the audience through predictive listening, because it's really hard to read where she's going without a knowledge of what's going on. We don't know the language, so we only have expression to go on. Okay, move to the next slide, Carolyn. So here's Carolyn's story. And Carolyn, could you just read the first, 2 sentences?
Lingvu estas amusa afero. Granda partu de gia signifo diviniat.
Great. Thank you. And again,
That bad, huh? You're cutting me off.
yeah. So Carolyn is a great sport because I don't know who speaks Esperanto. I know it was a thing like back in the day, and it didn't take on the way it was supposed to. But I wanted a language that, though it related to many of languages of people who are attending today, it probably is not a language that anyone spoke, which puts us all in the same position. We're listening to a story without any understanding of what it's about. Okay, move on to the next slide. And I'd like everyone to read this. Right, to some degree, in fact to a large degree, this is the point of the whole presentation. And we're at maybe a third of the way through, and obviously what's missing so far is music, and that's really the end goal. So this is the point, though, that as performers and as audience members, we have a responsibility to tune in to all of the expressive signs of delivery that the performers are giving. But there is so much more when it comes to being a listener or being a performer, and that is knowing what you're talking about, of using, by all means necessary, analysis, study, experience, intuition, to come up with something worth telling, and then to tell it in the most effective way possible. Okay, so next slide. Storytelling's relationship to music. Music without words, and that's what we're really focused on today. I think music with words has quite a different relationship because the words, of course, are a primary vehicle for understanding. The relationship to music is stylized expressivity, but unique traditions. So when performing music. So unique traditions would mean knowing how to set your guitar amp so that you sound like Nirvana if performing in a Nirvana style. Knowing how to use your bow to sound like a classical style of playing Mozart or Haydn. Understanding how to dig into the instrument in the Kodai Sonata in a way that is unique to that era and different from Johann Sebastian Bach. So stylized expressivity becomes a really important part. Also, dramatic use of timing, volume, timbres, and articulations. This is similar to what we had before in good storytelling. Familiarity with form, thematic material, and harmonic language. The performer must understand what it is that they are presenting as deeply as possible. And then lastly, this is a similar bullet, emotional, intellectual investment of the audience. That is, the audience must be invested in the performance itself. They can't just passively be enjoying it, but to get the most, they must be invested. And this involves, similar to the story, when I mention Bastian, or when I mention Anna, or any of the characters, what everyone is doing when you listen to stories is you are feeling what they feel, you are creating this world that they live in, and you're trying to predict what's going to happen. And predicting negative things raises our heart rate, makes us sweaty, but that's one of the joys of listening to stories. It's not that we are simply taking in stories, we are actively participating as listeners in those stories and constantly predicting. Music is a much more complicated language, and now we'll try or I should say not complicated, it is a more abstract language. So let's get into that. Next slide, please. Key differences between storytelling and music. Music is abstract, though relating to life and experiences, it does so without specificity, which means each of us create our own specific reality when relating to a music. And there are certain things you can learn to understand, that is harmonic systems, the idea of progression, common forms or the way that music is constructed, but it tends to be abstract, and most people see it as a surface in a very abstract nature, creating their own reality. The other key difference is we all have far less experience, let alone shared experience, interpreting music as a language. What this means is we all live a fairly similar human existence. We do not necessarily have similar musical experiences, or that is, to put a finer point on it, we have every minute of every day experience with life, and life is the fodder for storytelling. We have, even professional musicians, less minutes interpreting music, sharing that interpretation, and talking with others about music. So our ability to predict and understand stories intuitively is far more developed than our ability to do that with music. Okay, next. So, bridging the gap between these traditions as we move from storytelling towards music. There's two things I'd like to look at. One is proportion, form and time, and then analysis, that is a sketch of what happens. You might even think backwards from a full-fledged story to a storyboard. That would be a way of doing this. And what we're going to do is move from the story of Anna and Bastian to a piece of Johann Sebastian Bach, and use that story to I hope, better clarify the possibility that exists when you look deeper and deeper and deeper inside music for its own language and the language of composition. Next slide. Okay, proportion, form, and time. What you see in front of you, scribbled though it looks, in colors is the prologue and the epilogue at the end in yellow, and then absolutely proportional, each of the chapters. Chapter 1 in teal, Chapter 2 in green, Chapter 3 in navy, and Chapter 4 in orange. Absolutely proportional to the story that I read to you. And let's do the big reveal. Go to the next slide. Okay, there it is. Go to the next slide. Okay, so evidently the big reveal comes up later. So let's go back a slide. I don't have the preview of the next slide, so I've forgotten which one I put next. So again, this is proportion, form, and time for the story. Go to the next slide. There it is. Go backward. And go forward. Whoops, backward, backward. Can you go backward, Carolyn? Okay, proportion, form, and time. Let's go back one more. I think Elliot, maybe a couple other people recognize that this sketch is actually the phrase structure of the prelude from the no, I think it's the Magdalena, but it is the prelude to the second suite. So this is the story, and here it is in a storyboard form. So if you could take a second to read through that. Okay, we'll have time to review it more carefully as we introduce the prelude, but move forward one slide. So this is what I wanted to break it back down to, which is just the shape, and then the big reveal. Go to the next slide. And that is mapped, of course, onto the Suite 2 prelude in D minor. So, go to the next slide. So here is the analysis of the story that I started with, and we're now going to convert that to the analysis of the piece. Next slide. So Anna is introduced. There's an A idea, A for Anna, and by an idea, what I mean is a rhythmic idea. So the idea happens to have a strong beat 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the arrival note in each one is beat 2. That's what I'm calling the A idea, and it's used 4 times. An introduction, we are just simply in D minor. Anna is introduced in terms of a narrator. So, time for action. So we have Anna leaves the burrow for adventure. Next slide. Okay, so what happens when a character goes through a movie? Well, the character is introduced, but now the character develops. That is, they don't stay the same. They continuously evolve. So now it's Anna's idea, which is a single bar unit repeated 4 times in the prologue. Second time. Third time. Fourth time. And it concludes on D minor. Okay, so now we're in the second phrase. This is A plus 1. We start with that same idea of rising up to beat 2. But this time, there's an extra bar. And then a second time, A plus 1. Now, Anna spots a promising new reef and ventures over. Next slide. That's A. There's no time for A plus 1 because she spotted where she wants to go. So now we have A for the last time and then a transition to the new home of F major where she finds herself in a new reef. Okay, so now we're in the new home, chapter 2. So next slide, Anna meets Bastian. So A and B. So we have our A idea. Okay, there's the A idea. Now she meets Bastian, and Bastian is a different rhythmic idea. It's a single note that's detached from 3 slurred notes. So once again, it's an A-B idea. So here we've got F major, and then it repeats again. Anna, Bastian. Now we have a little bit of a transition as Anna grows in confidence. Now, Anna speaks 3 times in a row. We have Anna's rhythmic idea presented 3 times in a row. Let's go to the next slide. So 3 times in a row, Anna took over. So if you go back to the very first section of the green chapter, Anna and Bastian exchanged bars twice. Then Anna, feeling more confident, speaks 3 times in a row with this rising motive. And as you would expect, Bach and Bastian complements that. Now Bastian speaks for 3 consecutive bars in his rhythmic pattern, retreating to a new key of A minor. Next slide. Okay, and I'm breaking up the 3 bars a little bit more than I would in a performance for effect. Okay, so now we find ourselves in a new place. In the story, Bastian and Anna have become separated. Anna calls out. Let's go to the next slide. It's a question. Bastian, where are you? So we're in an F sharp diminished chord. So Bastian hears this, and using his rhythmic motive, he ascends for 4 consecutive bars to an A7 chord. And this A7 chord in the story is where they're now high enough up that they can see home. Once again, an A7, of course, points to home. So here's Bastian's rhythmic idea as it ascends 4 times. So we ascended up this scale, passed through D minor and arrive at an A7 chord. So we're at the top of the screen. They begin to dance together. And this is, I think, a really, really clever idea of Bach. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we have this B idea, and then A, B, and then A kind of with B in there. So Anna and Bastian are kind of being combined. Let's go to the next slide, moving up over sandy hills. Okay, back down to the seabed. Let's go to the next slide. And we go through a sequence, a scalar sequence. Okay, and we have the Anna motive again from the very beginning, as she sees this highest choral and decides to chase up. So let's go to the next slide. So this is an A+1 idea, basically alternating from a 5/7 to a 1 and then a 5/5 to a 5. We don't really need to know that unless you speak theory. And what's fascinating about this, if you chose to study this piece for the high and low notes in each phrase, it keeps expanding from the very first phrase all the way to this moment. And we have the very lowest note and the highest note, all in quick succession. So here's the A+1 idea. You'll recognize that this is the same rhythmic thing that we started, the Anna idea. So it's A+1, Anna. Anna +1 again. Okay, so in the span of a few minutes, we've gone from the lowest note to the highest note of the piece. And I don't think that this is an accident. Bach has planned this structure the whole way through. This is in the story when they reach the highest place on the choral and they can see all the world around them. And we have an interesting, I should say, too, this is only one way of interpreting this. And I think right doesn't exist. I think interesting exists. I think things that are studied and pay as close attention to music as they can exist. But I think it's futile to look for right. Wrong may exist, or maybe more mischievous than it should be. But in this case, I'm choosing a particular way of playing this prelude that helps paint the picture of the story, and I find it an interesting way. I don't know if this is exactly how I would play it on the stage. So just a little bit of a disclaimer. So we get to this top, and one of the ways you could say that A plus B is being used here is you have the Anna, or the bastion idea. One note plus 3 slurred notes. Then in the middle, A is on beat 2. Beat 2 is why this whole prelude could be considered maybe sarabande-esque, because beat 2 ends up being the most important thing. Again, going to the beginning. Beat 2 most important, beat 1 second most important, beat 3 maybe the least important. It's another way you could look at it. So we get to this climax, the highest note, and we have Bastion's idea, and then Anna's idea. Bastion's idea, Anna's idea, Bastion. Okay, and this is of course where they're falling from the highest point down the choral. Initially they are mesmerized by this sight of being so high up, but they fall to the fermata, the dramatic pause. So dramatic pauses are important in storytelling. So in the way I chose to tell the story at the beginning, Anna is waking up. And so there's not a lot of motion now, but she's near her home. So we're pretty close to D minor. There's the Anna motive. Anna motive again. And here's the beginning. I actually repeated this same sentence. Okay, as she musters up the strength, extending her front arms, trying to stand up so she can move again. So we get this transition material back towards D minor. Chapter 4. This is the first real full cadence we've had since back when the navy blue material started. So can we move to the next slide? Okay, and we have the A idea twice. Rising again from an E. She remembers Bastion, so it's still rising up, but it's got this Bastion idea of 1 slur, 3 separate. G. Now we have the epilogue. So let me play that A and then A, B again. So this is once she started moving back to her burrow, the last action, or chapter 4. So now we have the epilogue, And what I love to do here is actually quote the Anna theme at the beginning and add a little improvisation in the style of the same rhythm. So the chords are... Okay, so I like, let me see. And we come to the end. Okay, so move on to the next slide. So there we are with our, again, maybe I'll keep the cello up. There we are with our Bach suite and unadorned, unanalyzed. These are just the phrases, and you can see in the navy blue section, I've put 2 thick lines at the end of other phrases. So in my thinking for constructing this story, what I thought of the navy blue was chapter 4, but really in 3 parts, 4A, 4B, and 4C. Because although there are internal cadences, even in 5-1 D minor, there isn't a real stopping point until you get to... And Bach could have ended right there in D minor. There are none of the other cadences I find in this large section that you potentially could end on. Okay, next slide. So, music as storytelling. Obviously, we have stylized expressivity and traditions, things that you need to know, and this is how most people interface. There's also dramatic use of timing, volume, timbres, articulations. We've come up with this. What I'm advocating for in this presentation is familiarity with form, thematic material, and language as elements for storytelling with whether it's a guitar, Elliot, or whether it's a cello, or whatever you are using as your medium for communicating an idea. It is critical to be as familiar as you can with the language of the composer, the traditions of the time, and with micro and macro analysis. Go to the next slide. Okay. Emotional intellectual investment of the audience. So here's where the audience comes in the same way that when you heard Carolyn read in Esperanto, there was certainly an appreciation of her expressive vernacular, her ability to spin out feelings, but without an understanding of what is actually being said, there is a whole world that is lost. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. So, the Mantis Shrimp. Why did I pick the Mantis Shrimp? Well, it wasn't random. I think this is a fascinating creature and one that bears consideration for its perception of color. The human eye has 3 photoreceptors and sees a spectrum that is, to us, rich and full and wildly varied. The Mantis Shrimp, if I recall, has 12 photoreceptors in each eye, and it sees, it perceives, and this is, I'll without belaboring it, I'll just state the point. It perceives things we cannot see ourselves. And that is why I picked the shrimp, because this is an important perspective for us as performers and us as audiences to bring with us to the practice room, to the stage, to the teaching studio. Our perspective of the world is uniquely our own, and not one other person on the planet sees the world the way we do. Music as an abstract language is one that varies that perspective even more. The way we transmit it and the way we perceive it is unique to ourselves, our experience, and our investment and intuition when approaching that object. It's really, really important for us as performers to remember that we have a unique perspective, which means everyone who's listening today, everyone has something unique to offer through music. You see the world differently. But there is also a responsibility, and that is other performers, or I should say other audience members, don't see the world the way we do. And so it's important to understand the form and the construct and context of the music we perform in such a way that we have the best chance of communicating its content and not simply its affect. Next slide. Okay, so wrap up. And I wanted to put a blank, that is an uncolored in score for everyone to consider, because this is what the musician approaches, especially with Bach. There are no hints at what you should do. There aren't crescendos, there aren't fortes, there aren't pianos, the slurs are somewhat dubious. All the answers are there, but you have to look. For audience and performer alike, this means knowing the language. In the same way that when I read the story of Bastian and Anna, you were able to easily understand the context, you were able to predict. All of this happens because you speak English well and you have lived a life that not a mantis shrimp would live, but a mantis shrimp living a more human existence. You understand, you're able to predict and feel what this mantis shrimp is feeling. You understand the language, and therefore you can predict it and get more out of it. Next slide. Communication. It is so important not just to have ideas, but to learn to communicate them well, to be clear, and this requires often multiple attempts to communicate. And feedback from others, and trial, and you grow in this. As performers, it's critical that you take into account how your audience is dealing with what you're trying to throw at them. Not suggesting that their experience should be in exactly what you are intending, but you should be attuned to their experience and how much we're able on the stage to create a drama in which they can live. Third, or next slide, perspective. We all have a unique perspective. I think the mantis shrimp is a wonderful example of that. Humans tend to think, and for a while thought, that the world was the center of everything. Science is something that continually moves forward. Our perspective on everything, there is no perspective on Earth that hasn't changed 100 years later. And it would be silly for us to think in 2021 that in 100 years people wouldn't look back on this time and think, oh, how silly we were to think that that was true. Perspective changes, and the audience and the performer all have unique perspectives, and I think that's an important thing to think about when producing music and studying music. Next. And the ocean of possibility. And I chose the word ocean not only because that's where the mantis shrimp lived, but because one of my favorite quotes is Bach that could literally mean brook. I think it was Brahms maybe that said, Bach is not a brook, he's an ocean. And I think there is an ocean of possibility. As performers and teachers and audiences, I think our perspective of the ocean tends to be what we see from above it. And we don't tend to look below it enough. And I just want to conclude by saying that there is an ocean of possibility if we all were to learn the language one step further than we know it today. There is an untold depth. And so with that, last slide. I would say thank you very much for attending this lecture. There's my contact info in case you have any questions or would like a follow-up conversation. This is the very first time I've given this particular format or style of lecture, and I will be interested to see it grow and develop over the next few years. But this is my absolute favorite thing to do, which is a marriage of performance and analysis and storytelling. So thank you very much, and I would love to take questions or engage in conversation with everyone who's here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Erik, Dr. Anderson. That was a beautiful, beautiful talk and journey through Bach and shrimp.
And shrimp.
And shrimp. So while my camera decides to misbehave, Zoom can't fool me because I can still talk. And I am going to go through and look at some questions and things in the chat. Wow, we have Jasmine. That was really great. Thank you so much. And while I look at some of the things in the chat and the Q&A, please feel free to take this time to type into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. You can see it in your bottom toolbar, and you can submit questions, which I will relay to Dr. Anderson. So from the chat, we have some beautiful commentary from Elliot Fisk, who is on our faculty as our guitar instructor. And he mentioned a couple questions. So let me look through here. I want to start with this fun one. Why the choice of Anna and Bastian? Is it the love story of AMB and JSB?
Yes, absolutely. I thought that was a happy coincidence. And also, since the language of analysis often uses A and B, that is, your A idea is contrasted with your B idea, I thought that would be a perfect way to go from Anna and Bastian to the A idea and the B idea. So it worked well on several levels.
Excellent. And next, from Elliot Fisk, beautiful playing. How do you manage to play so beautifully and keep the storyline going at the same time? Really contrapuntal thinking, just as JSB would have done.
Well, for me, it's a journey, and I'm somewhere up the sand hill. I haven't reached the top yet, but I would think that authenticity is a big part of it. That is, I love this music, care about this music, and have spent a great deal of time teaching, studying, and listening to others play it. And when you love something, there are details that emerge because you just couldn't stand them not to emerge. I think that's part of maybe good storytelling. So I would say it's not a contrived thing, or even a necessarily practice. That is, how do I get this to come out? I want these ideas to come out. I really want to share them with you, and it's from that almost desperate need to share ideas that I think Counterpoint comes out, at least for me. It's a less technical approach than kind of a communicative approach. But it's all born on playing and playing and playing and playing and studying and talking and all of that.
Excellent. We have a comment from Trevor. Thank you, Erik.
Hi, Trevor.
In what part of a musician's journey when learning a movement of Bach would they start to think about this? So often we just start with fingerings and bowings.
Yep. And that's where I was too. I remember one of my first teachers, her name was Trudy Sackerson, and she was like in her late 70s, south of Seattle, and I think she went to Curtis like a long, long time ago. But she gave me the that particular movement, and I remember her saying, "Oh, this is an amazing piece because it has like 45 shifts." And she was coming at it from a perspective wanting to teach me how to use the cello. So, Trevor, it's an interesting question. And I have to say, early on, probably there is more of a technical component to this. Music can be used to help students get better at what they're not good at, or as I needed as a teenager, I needed music that was going to keep me playing the cello. I didn't need to learn, I needed music that was going to keep me playing rather than quitting. So I think when you're young, there's a whole host of things that could influence why a teacher picks things. And it's not always because, there's always 20 levels that a teacher could do. But there's only one or two that you can work on now effectively. So I think you could hint at storytelling, but obviously if you gave someone, that prelude and it took 4 hours to get through the prelude in your first lesson, and you were heaping the responsibility of coming up with their own story and of mapping different bowings from one section onto another section in response to each other, I think it's too much. So definitely, just in the same way that when we're learning to read, we start with books that have unadorned sentences, and they slowly become more and more adorned and rich with meaning, yet simple. I think one of my favorite examples of this would be like East of Eden. You come up with a book like, or maybe of Mice and Men. That we'll go with a shorter one, but still a long book, and you can probably boil it down to kindness. Some people are just simply kind, but you say that over hundreds of pages so that it has deep roots in the meaning of what you say. So I think, to answer your question most succinctly, a good teacher has to read the student and recognize what they're ready for and what is going to inspire them. And sometimes people need fingerings. Sometimes people need to work on their bow technique for string crossings. Sometimes, like I was when I was younger, I needed to learn how to shift. So that's what we worked on with Bach. Thanks for the question.
Beautiful. Actually, I do have a question for you myself, Erik, while we allow people more time to type. For somebody who, has a difficult time finding storylines in a piece of music, maybe they haven't thought about something as avant-garde as shrimp in the ocean. But for somebody who might not be as comfortable in storytelling, do you have any tips on what might be some good baby steps to start?
Well, the funny thing, of course, is that, the person who taught me how to look deeply in Bach was Yehuda. It was a great summer at Aspen, and he was just marvelous in the way he challenged me. So this kind of answers Trevor's question too. I'd already played a lot of these movements. I was playing the Kodai Sonata at that time, and he challenged me to, one, play in tune in first position, and two, he challenged me to think about the Bach that I was not thinking about. So let me see. I went a little bit left and lost track of the question. Could you remind me the specificity of this? And I know I can get back on track.
Of course. Any small steps for someone who might have a hard time? Mm-hmm.
Got it. So what I meant to say is that shrimp and storytelling in this manner has actually never been part of how I've approached Bach. This idea was a wild idea that came about a few days ago. I have never, ever related this movement to shrimp before, or even a story. I'm really at home talking in the language of A+1, B, key changes, transitions, 5 of 5. So, but I guess if what I'm advocating for here is that is storytelling, and that is a language, and that if students are willing, or listeners are willing to spend time learning harmonic analysis, or learning how to map key changes, or learning the significance of the journey from a key, away from the key, and back towards a key, that itself is a dramatic narrative. It does not require shrimp. In this case, shrimp was an easy way for me to tell a story because we all understand stories. So I can't speak from the perspective of using stories to interpret Bach because I don't do that. I think about the motives as being alive themselves. Looking at any idea inside a movement and seeing how Bach develops that idea, that to me is drama. So I guess, without putting too fine a point on it, harmonic analysis and thematic content. Know it. Look for it. Look for melodic transformation. It's there. And then see it as dramatic narrative and as engaging, whether or not you turn it into shrimp. A stir fry of sorts.
Wonderful. And someone didn't have a question, but they wanted to share. This comes from Christian. Personally, I struggle rhythmically, but I really enjoyed how thorough and detailed Dr. Anderson's presentation was. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Christian.
We have a question from Jasmine. While using this piece as the model for this approach, I'm guessing Jasmine's alluding to your story. Did your expression and interpretation change, and how?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So a good example was I wanted to show how there's an A idea and a B idea in the second phrase. B idea. Okay, now maybe that's over stylized and overdone, but I'm also really hoping to connect that in a way that separates the two. So there's Anna's idea and there's Bastian's idea, and they're different. You can appreciate, if the first step to understanding how something is related is to appreciating the component parts. So if you can understand that is rhythmically different than, now naturally this derives that idea, it derives from the A idea. That three-note slur is right there from the very beginning. It's just now it's given a little bit more, like it's a Lego piece that was supportive, and now it becomes something that's more interesting. So, so yes, it does change the way I play because I had an a priori agenda today. Normally when I play Bach, I really try not to choose my slurs, not to choose my dynamics, not even to choose necessarily my tempo, maybe an overall affect prior to performing, and do all of that spontaneously in interaction with the room I'm in and how things go. So, but today, having a specific agenda, it did affect it. And I found it really funny, like when I got to, now Anna speaks 3 times. The rising note, and then Bastian speaks 3 times. Now, I've never tried to make these 3 bars. That is, if we're going 1, 2, 3, is 1 bar. Next bar is 3rd bar. It seems kind of silly to break that up, but it was necessary for today. So in some ways, I found new ways that I'll probably keep. There were some fun things about this story that I may keep. But in general, I like to start with a blank canvas just about every time, other than the work I've done to prepare knowledge of the piece.
Wonderful. We have some wonderful feedback from Thatcher. Brilliant lecture, Professor Anderson. Like a composer, you were able to establish very clear foundational ideas and explore them in different contexts while never losing your thorough line. Question. You mentioned that all musicians have their own unique perspectives. Bearing this in mind in your chamber projects, do you have to compromise your own intentions?
Yes, I play music with my wife. She's in my piano trio and my piano duo, which means...
Why are you laughing, Dr. Anderson? It must be wonderful to play with your wife.
No, she's a marvelous musician, and actually she's a good part of the reason that I think as thoroughly as I do and prepare as well as I do, because I want her approval and I want her to be delighted by the ideas, and I know that's a pretty high bar. Yeah, in chamber music, I think the delights of chamber music is exactly that. Just like you change, Hamlet and Ophelia. If you change the actor and actress, you're going to get a different chemistry. And that shouldn't be compromised, it should be celebrated. So I think chamber music is a wonderful opportunity to have varying degrees of unanimity or contrast. I've done a Quartet for the End of Time several times with different groups, and one of them in grad school, this was while we were at CCM, we had a Romanian violinist and an Australian clarinetist, and then Diane and I. And there was no unanimity. We played the music at the same time, but it was a celebration of 4 unique voices coming together on a piece. Whereas I think that might be a more European approach. The American approach, as I've seen in my life, has been more, we like to be more tightly unified in our ideas. Like, I know you like this way and I like that way, let's find a compromise and match our sound. But I think both offer such wonderful possibilities. Both performances, I'm crying during the 8th movement. And it's not because it's unified or because it's different, but just because the beauty of human beings coming together to do something is fantastic. So I don't think in chamber music you need to conform unless that makes the group more comfortable with each other. In the case of someone being alienated or who feels like their ideas are not being listened to or acknowledged by the other members, then I think there's a problem. But that's the beauty of chamber music, is the last thing I would want to play with in a quartet is 3 other people that think like me. How am I going to learn? What new ideas am I going to get out of that? So it's why I never listen to myself play, or I wouldn't buy a ticket to go hear myself. I'm not going to learn anything. But I would love to have the opportunity to hear someone do something in a way that I had not considered. And that's why chamber music is wonderful. Good question, Thatcher.
Excellent. I don't see any more questions. So before we close out, I will give people maybe 2 extra minutes to submit any questions in the chat or Q&A that you want to relay to Dr. Anderson. And while some of you might be typing, I wanted to share a couple links with you all in the chat. All of our talks that we're doing now in Zoom are available on YouTube. So if you joined us halfway through and you immediately want to go back and watch the beginning, it's already on YouTube. So you can watch this from the beginning on the Close Encounters with Music YouTube channel, and I put that link in the chat. And if you are super intrigued by today, which I hope you all are, we do have events coming all through August 2nd, and you can register for them on the Close Encounters with Music website on the calendar. So I just popped in the calendar in the chat. So you can go to that link and you can browse our events and you can click on an event you're interested in, and you can sign up to get a Zoom link the day before and the day of. So check out all of our events there. And let's see. Oh, yes, there is another question from Elliot Fisk. I wrote in the chat the idea of a minuet versus saraband, reading the basic impulse of the rhythm, the weight on beat 1 versus beat 2. So I think, I believe Elliot Fisk was asking about...
Yeah. That's one that has a fantastic, like, beat 2. But yeah,
yes.
go ahead.
I believe, I want to find his exact words in the chat so I don't misremember what he said. He's interpreting the prelude as a minuet. And he says this is what Bach does, writes an endless double entendre. So I don't know, the idea of interpretation with this prelude having a strong beat 1 versus 2, if you had any thoughts on that with the D minor.
Yes, that's something I would love to explore. And, you know, if you get used to putting the weight on beat 2, what's more fun than stopping, stop that approach and come up with a different approach and just see what's there. So comparing it to a little bit faster, more sprightly dance and comparing it with a strong beat 1, I think there'd be an awful lot there to explore. So thanks for the idea, Elliot.
Oh, yes, he mentioned... yeah, he mentioned the opening D to F slurred with the A being flattando or less, as another interpretive thought. Excellent. I believe that is it for our questions. I wanted to give a big round of applause and congratulations and thank you to Dr. Anderson for bringing us on this storytelling adventure through Bach and just musical ideas in general. Dr. Anderson, do you have any parting words before we close out today?
Nope. Live inquisitively and don't ever settle on one interpretation.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. Again, Close Encounters with Music events calendar for all of our future talks, and the YouTube channel for archive presentations and our student faculty recitals. We're going to be having some virtual concerts, which are called the Moonlight Sonata concerts, and those are also going to be available on our YouTube channel. So Close Encounters with Music is where you want to look. And thank you all so much for joining our very first launching public event with Dr. Anderson. So we wish you all a beautiful day, and we hope to see you all soon for another presentation.
Thank you very much, Carolyn.
You.